There are moments in life that defy explanation, moments that unravel the very fabric of our understanding, leaving us grappling with a reality far more chilling than any fiction. Imagine a world where what you see isn't real, where the evidence before your eyes contradicts every logical possibility. This isn't a ghost story or a tale of the supernatural, though you might wish it were. This is a story of a woman, a security camera, and a terrifying void that swallowed her whole, leaving behind only an impossible image. Our story begins in the quiet, unassuming town of Blackwood, a place where the biggest news usually revolves around the annual pumpkin festival or the high school football team's latest victory. It's the kind of town where neighbors leave their doors unlocked and children play freely in the streets until dusk. A town where everyone knows everyone and secrets, if they exist, are usually well kept beneath a veneer of small-town charm. But even in the most idyllic settings, darkness can fester, and sometimes it can consume everything. This is where we meet Amelia Thorne, a woman in her late 30s, with eyes that held the warmth of a summer's day and a laugh that could brighten even the gloomiest room. Amelia wasn't extraordinary in any grand sense. She was a beloved art teacher at Blackwood High, known for her vibrant personality and her knack for inspiring even the most reluctant students. She lived in a quaint Victorian house on the edge of town, surrounded by a garden she meticulously tended, her life a tapestry woven with simple joys and deep affections. Her husband, David, a quiet, steady architect, was her anchor, their love story a testament to enduring companionship. They were, by all accounts, the perfect couple, a picture of domestic bliss, their future stretching out before them, filled with shared dreams and quiet contentment. Or so it seemed. The evening of October 27th started like any other. David had a late meeting in the city, and Amelia, after grading a stack of art projects, decided to spend her evening curled up with a book and a cup of herbal tea. The house was calm, the only sounds the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the gentle rustling of autumn leaves outside. Amelia, ever the creature of habit, went through her evening routine, checking the locks, turning off lights, and finally, making her way to bed around 10:30. David called her on his drive home, a routine call to say he was on his way, and Amelia, her voice soft with sleepiness, told him she loved him. Those would be the last words he would ever hear from her, spoken directly. David arrived home just after midnight, the house eerily dark and silent. He noticed Amelia's car was still in the driveway, which was unusual. She usually parked it in the garage. A flicker of unease, quickly dismissed as a minor oversight, danced in the back of his mind. He found the front door unlocked, another peculiarity. Amelia was meticulous about security. Inside, the house was cold, a stark contrast to the warmth he expected. He called her name, his voice echoing in the empty rooms, a growing sense of dread tightening in his chest. No response. He checked their bedroom, empty. The bathroom, empty. Every room yielded the same chilling silence. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping tendril that wrapped itself around his heart. David called Amelia's phone, only to hear its muffled ringtone coming from the kitchen counter. Her purse, her keys, her wallet, all were there, untouched. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. He called her friends, her colleagues, anyone he could think of, his voice growing more frantic with each unanswered question. No one had seen her since earlier that day. Desperate, David eventually called the police. Detective Miller, a seasoned officer with a tired face and eyes that had seen too much, arrived quickly. He listened patiently to David's panicked account, his expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. A missing person case in Blackwood was rare, almost unheard of. The initial search of the house revealed nothing out of place, no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no note. It was as if Amelia had simply walked out of her perfectly ordinary life and disappeared without a trace. Then came the security footage. David, in his rising anxiety, remembered the small security camera installed discreetly above their front door, a gift from his overprotective brother after a string of minor break-ins in a neighboring town. He had almost forgotten about it. With trembling hands, he and Detective Miller reviewed the footage from that night. What they saw next would forever haunt David and forever baffle the seasoned detective. At precisely 10:47 p.m., the footage showed Amelia. She was wearing her favorite blue robe, her hair tied loosely, a book in her hand. She walked out of the front door, closing it softly behind her. Her movements were calm, unhurried, almost serene. She paused for a moment on the porch, looked out at the moonlit garden, and then, slowly, she walked down the steps, turned, and disappeared into the shadows of the night. David's heart leaped. Relief, a wave of dizzying euphoria, washed over him. "She went for a walk," he exclaimed, a desperate hope clinging to his voice. She must have just gone for a walk, maybe to clear her head. But then, the detective's voice, low and grim, cut through his fragile hope. "Mr. Thorne," Miller said, his eyes still fixed on the screen, "look closely at her feet." David leaned in, his breath catching in his throat. As Amelia walked down the steps, her feet, usually so sure-footed, seemed to not quite touch the ground. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was a strange, ethereal quality to her movement, a slight levitation that defied gravity. And then, as she reached the edge of the frame and vanished, there was another detail, one that made David's blood run cold. The timestamp on the footage. 10:47 p.m. David had called Amelia at 10:55 p.m., 8 minutes after she had supposedly walked out the door. And she had answered, her voice sleepy, saying she loved him. She was in the house. He had spoken to her. But the security footage showed her walking out. And she wasn't there. The world tilted on its axis. The image on the screen, irrefutable proof, clashed violently with his own memory, his own reality. Who was that woman on the footage? Where was the real Amelia? And what horrifying secret was Blackwood, or perhaps Amelia herself, keeping hidden in its silent, leafy depths? The comfortable predictability of David's life had just shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, and he was about to discover that the perfect picture he had of his life and his wife was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. David's initial panic gave way to a profound chill, a sense that he was stepping into a quagmire he couldn't comprehend. He stood there, staring at the screen, the image of his wife replaying in his mind, a bizarre phantom, a ghost of herself. Detective Miller, with his years of experience, had seen enough crime and mystery to know that something was profoundly wrong here. He immediately ordered a digital forensics expert to examine the footage, to verify its authenticity. But even as they waited, another question ate away at David. If that wasn't Amelia, what was it? And why did it look so much like her there at the exact time she was supposed to be inside? The more he thought about it, the more David began to notice other anomalies. His wife never went to bed that late, especially when he was away. And her car, usually parked neatly in the garage, was in the driveway. It wasn't carelessness, it was a sign of a routine that had been broken. Detective Miller, with his sharp eye, noticed it too. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his tone shifting from professional to something more grave, "we need to dig deeper. There's something in this house, in her life, that we're missing." They began their search again, this time with a new kind of caution, no longer just looking for signs of a struggle, but for signs of a secret. They looked everywhere, from hidden drawers to concealed documents. And then, in the back of Amelia's closet, under a pile of old blankets, Miller found a small, locked wooden box. David, after a moment's hesitation, broke the lock. Inside wasn't money or jewelry, but a collection of old notebooks written in Amelia's own hand. These were not diaries, but fragmented notes, drawings, and scattered thoughts. David began to read, and each page revealed an Amelia he didn't know. She wrote of fears, of strange dreams, and of a persistent feeling of being watched. She mentioned times she saw shadows at the end of the hall, whispers that only she could hear. At first, David dismissed them as an artist's imagination, but as he read on, he found a disturbing pattern. A few pages in, there was a detailed drawing of a strange symbol, a circle with a zigzag line running through it, and beneath it a single handwritten line, "He is coming." David didn't recognize the symbol, but it brought to mind a story Amelia had once told him about an old family friend, a mysterious man she only called the Old Man and said was an art collector. She had said that this old man was always obsessed with ancient symbols and stories of things that didn't belong in this world. David had never thought much of it, but now that name gnawed at his mind. As they were delving into the notebooks, a call came in from the digital forensics expert. His voice was laced with bewilderment. "Detective," he said, "the footage is real. No tampering, no special effects. But it's more than just an image." He explained that there was a low-frequency signal, a type of audio interference, embedded in the footage. It was too subtle to be perceived, but it was there, repeating a specific pattern. It wasn't part of the video, but an audio overlay. And what was most terrifying was that when they isolated it, it formed a repeating sequence of sounds, almost like a hum. David suddenly remembered something he had tried to forget. Weeks ago, when he and Amelia were watching a movie, she had abruptly gotten up and said she heard a strange hum coming from inside the house. He hadn't heard anything, and she had dismissed it as tiredness. But now it became a terrifying piece in this bizarre puzzle. At the same time, David also started receiving strange, blocked phone calls. When he picked up, there was only silence on the other end, or sometimes a strange clicking sound. At first, he thought they were wrong numbers, but their frequency started to feel threatening. He remembered Amelia's notes about being watched, and a cold suspicion began to creep into his mind. Were these calls, these noises, connected to her disappearance? David's relationship with those around him also began to complicate. Amelia's best friend, Sarah, a practical and grounded woman, was surprisingly distant and cold. When David asked her about any secrets Amelia might have kept, Sarah had responded with a cryptic remark, "Who knows who a woman really is, David? Maybe she wasn't who you thought." The statement, like a dagger, left a deep wound in David's heart. Did Sarah know something he didn't? Or was she hiding a secret of her own? Meanwhile, Detective Miller had found another disturbing lead. He had investigated the old man that Amelia had mentioned in the notebooks. He found that this man, a wealthy art collector named Elias Vance, had died years ago. But the strange thing was, Vance had left his entire collection to a shadowy charity, and all of his documents had been sealed. However, a former employee of Vance's, a retired groundskeeper, revealed a chilling detail. Vance had spent his final years researching a phenomenon known as lingering echoes, images of people recorded in space and time, but not actually existing there. He believed that these echoes were signs of a greater presence, a force that was trying to pass through the boundaries between worlds. Instantly, David connected the dots to the security footage. Amelia hadn't walked outside. It wasn't a ghost. It was a lingering echo. But why did it appear? And what did it mean for her disappearance? David looked at Amelia's notebooks, at the strange symbol, at the haunting hum. He realized that Amelia hadn't just been sensing these things, she had been trying to understand them. She had tried to tell him, but he had been too busy with his perfect life to listen. As night fell, David sat alone in the empty house, Amelia's notebooks scattered across the floor. He looked at an old photo of them, smiling brightly, a happy couple oblivious to the secrets that lurked beneath the surface. He realized that he had not just lost his wife, but he had lost the very image of the woman he thought he knew. And in the deepening darkness, he received a strange message on his phone, a text message from a blocked number with only a single line of text. "You're getting closer." The door to David's house may have closed, but it was only the beginning of a maze of shadows. That cryptic text message, "You're getting closer," turned David's fear into a grim determination. He knew he was no longer an observer. He was a part of this game, a pawn on a chessboard he didn't understand. With Detective Miller's reluctant assistance and the lingering suspicion of Amelia's friend Sarah, David began to follow the clues hidden in his wife's notebooks. The notebooks were not just fragmented notes, they were a map. A map of locations, times, and symbols. David realized that Amelia had been quietly investigating a network of oddities, places where lingering echoes had appeared. She had documented patterns, audio frequencies, and even faces she had seen in passing in old photographs. It all pointed to one person, Elias Vance. And one place, his estate on the outskirts of Blackwood, a vast, derelict property guarded by a rusted iron fence and no trespassing signs. David and Miller arrived at the estate under the cover of darkness, their flashlights barely able to pierce the thick night. The house, a crumbling Gothic structure, exuded a sense of rot and decay. Weeds grew wild, windows were broken, and a strange silence permeated the air. They found an old, dusty laboratory, where Vance's notes, filled with intricate theories and formulas, were scattered across a table. Vance wasn't just an art collector, he was an obsessed scientist who believed he could collect and control these lingering echoes. He believed that the images were not just remnants of a person, but potential doorways to another dimension. But what truly chilled David was the collection of photos he found in a metal box. Old, sepia-tone pictures showed Vance with a woman who looked exactly like Amelia. But the photograph was taken decades ago. It was Amelia's mother. The secret began to unravel. Amelia's mother, a talented artist, had worked for Elias Vance as a young woman. She had been drawn into Vance's mad experiments. She also had the ability to see and hear the echoes, a hereditary gift. Vance had used her as a test subject, attempting to open the doors he believed these echoes could lead to. But something went wrong. One of his experiments failed spectacularly, creating a temporary breach, a crack in reality. Amelia's mother was pulled into it, and Vance, in a desperate attempt to save her, created a loop to keep her in place. That loop created the very echoes Vance had been studying for years, images of her appearing and disappearing, like a whisper of a person trapped. And now Amelia, who had inherited her mother's ability, was beginning to sense it. She wasn't just seeing the shadows her mother had seen, she was beginning to recognize the humming, those low-frequency signals. The security footage wasn't a coincidence. It was a sign. A call from her mother, from another world, a world held captive in a space-time loop. But the story didn't end there. As Miller was examining Vance's notes, David saw a small, hidden photograph under a table. It showed a young man with cold eyes, standing next to Vance. The man looked a lot like David, but it wasn't him. Under the photo, a name was scrawled: Elijah, Vance's son. The truth, a horrifying truth, dawned on David. Elias Vance was dead, but his son, Elijah, had continued his father's work. He had been watching Amelia, waiting for her abilities to emerge. He didn't just want to use her abilities, he wanted to have her, to create a complete connection to the world her mother was trapped in. And David, who had married Amelia, was a part of this plan. Elijah had orchestrated everything, from David and Amelia's meeting to the installation of the security camera. He had used David as a lure, a conduit to get close to Amelia. David felt the world spin. His marriage, his love, it was all a carefully constructed lie. David hadn't married Amelia. He had married a woman chosen to be part of a terrifying experiment. He remembered Sarah's distance and her suspicion about him knowing who Amelia was. Sarah wasn't being distant. She was trying to protect David, subtly warning him. She knew what had happened to Amelia's mother, and she knew about Elijah. She was the one who had reached out to Amelia when the humming began, and she was the one who helped Amelia document what she was seeing and hearing. As the truth was revealed, a sudden noise came from outside. A door slammed shut. Elijah had arrived. David and Miller, trapped in the desolate house, came face to face with their enemy. He emerged from the shadows, his eyes cold, and a smirk on his face. "You made it this far," he said, his voice laced with a cruel satisfaction, "but you won't be able to save her. She didn't vanish. She went home." Elijah explained that he had completed his father's experiment. He had used the low-frequency signals, the hum, to create a more powerful loop. The security footage wasn't an echo. It was a live recording of Amelia as she was pulled into her mother's world. She didn't disappear, she crossed over. And he, Elijah, was the one controlling that loop. He could pull her back, but only when he wanted to. He wanted David to face the truth, to feel the ultimate pain of betrayal and loss. David's world completely collapsed. His wife wasn't gone. She wasn't somewhere he could find her. She was in another dimension, a world he couldn't reach. Elijah, had not only taken the woman he loved, but he had taken the very life he thought he had. The climax reached its peak when Elijah, with a sinister smile, told David, "You have a choice. Let me go, and I'll give you a chance to say goodbye to her, just one last time. Or you can try to fight, and I'll erase her from the loop forever." David looked at Miller, who had his gun drawn, ready to act. But David knew that a gun couldn't fight something that defied the rules of this world. He looked at the image of Amelia on his phone, an image of a woman he had loved, a woman he thought he knew. And he knew that he had to do something to save her, even if it meant facing an unimaginable choice, a horrible sacrifice, to deal with the man who had turned his life into a lie. This confrontation was not just about getting a woman back, it was about reclaiming the truth, about fighting for a love that was built on a lie, and about facing a brutal reality he never imagined. Faced with Elijah's cruel offer, David stood at an impossible crossroads. Detective Miller, with his gun still pointed at Elijah, looked at David, his eyes showing a flicker of hesitation. Should they comply with a madman, or believe that truth and justice could triumph? David knew that Miller's gun could never apprehend a man who could manipulate reality. There was only one way to win. He had to beat him at his own game. "I agree," David said, his voice trembling. "Give me the chance to say goodbye. Just one time." Elijah's smirk grew into a triumphant grin. He produced a strange device, a small metal box with a series of buttons and a small screen. "It's not a conversation, David," he said. "It's a connection. She'll be there, in the loop. And you'll be able to see her, hear her, but only for a moment. When I'm done, she's gone. Forever." David realized this was a trap. Elijah didn't want him to say goodbye. He wanted him to witness Amelia's end, to feel the ultimate pain of powerlessness. But he had no other choice. He took the box, and as he pressed a marked button, a small screen lit up, filled with static. And then, through the static, an image appeared. It was Amelia. She wasn't in a room. She was in a strange space, a place where light and shadow intertwined, a place with no walls, no ceiling. She looked at David, her eyes filled with terror and a deep sadness. "David," she whispered, her voice like an echo from a great distance. "Can you hear me?" Tears began to stream down David's face. "Amelia." "I'm here. I'm here." Elijah laughed. "She can't hear you, David. This is a one-way street. She's just a projected image. A puppet." But then, something unexpected happened. Amelia, with a fierce focus, looked directly into David's eyes. Did you find my notebooks?" she asked, her voice filled with desperation. David nodded. "I found them. I know everything." And then, with an incredible act of concentration, Amelia said something Elijah didn't expect. She didn't say goodbye. She spoke about a symbol, the symbol she had drawn in her notebooks. She described it in intricate detail, every line, every angle. "It's not a symbol," she said. "It's a switch. A switch for the loop." Elijah went still. He realized that Amelia was not just talking to David, she was conveying a hidden message. He tried to grab the box, but David already knew what to do. He looked at the symbol Amelia had described, and in a flash, he recognized it. It was a pattern, a sequence of buttons he could press on the device. He didn't have time to think. He just acted on instinct. He pressed the buttons in the right order. As David hit the last button, a strange sound, like a thunderclap, erupted from the box. The light from the screen flickered violently, and then it went dead. Elijah screamed, a cry of rage and frustration. He lunged at David, but Miller, finally acting, tackled him to the ground. The box fell to the floor, and Amelia's image vanished. David felt a sinking feeling in his chest. He had messed everything up. He had destroyed his last chance. But then, a strange thing happened. The entire room began to shake. The light from the flashlight flickered, and the air grew heavy, as if something was trying to push its way into their world. And then, in the middle of the room, in the empty air, a faint shape began to materialize. It wasn't an echo. It was Amelia, but not as before. She was there, in the middle of space, but her body was not completely solid. She staggered, as if she had just been pulled from a nightmare. David ran to her, wrapping his arms around her. Her body was cold, as if she had just returned from a very distant place. She looked at David, her eyes still filled with fear, but also with a glimmer of recognition. You did it," she whispered. "You broke the loop." Elijah, now restrained by Miller, looked at them, his eyes filled with a crazed fury. "Impossible. She can't get out. You've ruined it." He was right. They had broken the loop. But at what cost? Detective Miller took Elijah into custody, but the story didn't end there. Amelia had returned, but she was not the woman David had known. She had lost parts of her memory, pieces of herself. She had been trapped in another space for so long, and it had left a deep scar on her soul. She remembered David, she loved him, but a part of her was still in the world of the lingering echoes. In the end, David and Amelia lived a new life, a life without horrifying secrets. But the sounds, the images, the hums still appeared occasionally. They were reminders that the world is not as simple as we think, and there are things hidden beneath the surface that we cannot see. The story of David and Amelia is a reminder that love, trust, and courage can triumph over the greatest darkness. But it is also a warning that there are some secrets we are not meant to uncover, and some questions we should never ask. If you found this story compelling, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other mysterious and thrilling videos. Be sure to turn on notifications to be the first to discover stories that science cannot explain. And be sure to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this case and what you would do if you were in David's position. I believe you also have special thoughts and feelings about this story.